Welcome, everyone. Today, you'll discover the incredible success story of Nike, from $0 to a $190 billion empire. This story is great for your English because it uses simple, clear language, helps you learn new words, and improves your listening and reading skills in an interesting way. Imagine a world where Nike never existed. No Air Jordans, no Just Do It. No Cristiano Ronaldo, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or Serena Williams wearing the most legendary sports brand on earth. But here's the shocking truth. Nike started with nothing, not millions, not billions. Just a simple dream. A young man had no money, no factory, and no investors. He didn't own a business. He didn't even know if he would succeed. But what he did have was a vision. To build something so powerful that the world's greatest athletes would one day wear his shoes. And today, Nike is worth over $190 billion. So how did this happen? How did one man go from selling shoes out of a car trunk to building the biggest sports empire in history? How did Nike become the brand that dominates the feet of the fastest runners, the strongest athletes, and the most legendary sports players? If you watch until the end, you'll discover the true secret behind Nike's rise. You'll understand why Nike isn't just a brand. It's a revolution. And most importantly, this story isn't just about shoes. It's about persistence, belief, and never giving up. So, let's go back to the very beginning, to the birth of the man who started it all. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Dreamer. The year was 1938, and in a small town in Portland, Oregon, a baby boy was born. His name? Philip Hampson Knight. He wasn't born rich, he wasn't born famous, but he was born with something far more powerful, a competitive spirit. His father, Bill Knight, was a newspaper publisher. A tough man, a man who believed in hard work and discipline. Phil grew up in a strict household. His father refused to give him money easily. If Phil wanted something, he had to earn it himself. From an early age, Phil was different. He wasn't the loudest kid. He wasn't the strongest. But he was fast. He loved to run. Running gave him freedom. Running made him feel alive. But little did he know that his love for running would one day change the world. As a teenager, Phil became obsessed with track and field. He joined his high school's running team and trained hard every day. But there was a problem: the shoes. The running shoes available at the time were heavy, uncomfortable, and slow. Every time he ran, he felt like the shoes were holding him back. Why aren't there better running shoes? He thought. That question stuck in his mind for years. And one day, it would lead him to create Nike. After high school, Phil went to the University of Oregon. He wasn't just an ordinary student. He became a star athlete on the track team. And this is where fate introduced him to the man who would change his life. Bill Bowerman. Bill Bowerman wasn't just any coach. He was a legend. He had one goal: to make his runners faster than anyone else. But he didn't just train them physically. He believed that the secret to speed was in the shoes. He was obsessed with designing better running shoes. Every day, he experimented with different materials, different soles, and different techniques. And when Phil Knight walked onto the track, Bowerman saw something in him. Phil wasn't the fastest runner. He wasn't the best. But he had passion and determination. Bowerman started testing new shoe designs on Phil and the other athletes. And that's when something clicked in Phil's mind. What if we created the world's best running shoes? Shoes that are light, fast, and powerful. This thought stayed with him, but he didn't act on it yet. After graduating in 1959, Phil had no idea what to do next. He had a business degree, but no job, no clear direction, no plan. His father told him to get a real job at a newspaper. But Phil didn't want an ordinary life. He wanted something more, so he made a crazy decision. With no job and no purpose, Phil decided to travel the world. He went to Hawaii, Japan, India, Greece, and many other countries. But one country changed everything: Japan. At the time, Japan was rising in the shoe industry. They had a company called Onitsuka Tiger, which made lightweight, high-quality running shoes. Phil was fascinated. What if I could bring these shoes to America? He had no company, no money, no experience. But in that moment, a crazy idea was born. Phil took a risk. He scheduled a fake business meeting with Onitsuka Tiger. He pretended to be the owner of a company called Blue Ribbon Sports. But here's the truth. Blue Ribbon Sports didn't exist. It was just a name he made up. Still, he walked into that meeting with confidence and told Onitsuka, "I want to sell your shoes in America." To his surprise, they agreed. And with just $50, Phil ordered his first batch of shoes. He started selling them from the trunk of his car at track meets. No office, no store. Just him, his passion, and his dream. Chapter 2. The Battle for Survival. Phil didn't have a store. He didn't have a big marketing budget. So every morning, he loaded his car with shoes and drove from track meet to track meet, hoping to sell them to athletes and coaches. He didn't have a fancy sales pitch. He didn't have advertisements. All he had was belief in his product. He would walk up to runners, show them the shoes, and let them try them on. And once they ran a few steps, they felt the difference. Word spread fast. More and more athletes started choosing Onitsuka shoes over big American brands. Phil's business, Blue Ribbon Sports, was growing. But there was one massive problem. Selling shoes was one thing, but running a business required money. Phil had to pay for inventory. He needed more shoes from Japan to keep up with demand. But Onitsuka Tiger had a strict policy. They only shipped shoes if he paid up front. And Phil? He was broke. Every time he made money from selling shoes, he had to immediately reinvest it to order more stock. He had no savings, no investors, and no financial backup. If he ran out of money, the business would collapse. So he did something that would change his life forever. Desperate for cash, Phil went to the bank to ask for a loan. He walked in, full of confidence, ready to explain his business. But the moment he said he was selling shoes from Japan, the bank manager frowned. Japanese shoes? In America? That's not going to work. The bank rejected him. No loan, no help, nothing. But Phil refused to give up. He went to another bank, rejected, another, rejected, another, rejected. Every time he heard no, his belief in his dream grew stronger. Finally, after weeks of rejection, one small bank agreed to lend him a tiny amount of money, barely enough to survive. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep Blue Ribbon Sports alive. Phil knew he couldn't do everything alone. Selling shoes, ordering inventory, managing money. So he hired his first employee, a man named Jeff Johnson. Jeff wasn't just any employee. He was obsessed with running and shoes. He worked day and night to help Phil sell more shoes. And soon, they opened their first official store, a small shop in Santa Monica, California. The business was finally growing. Sales were increasing. More athletes were buying their shoes. But just when things started looking good, Phil got a phone call that almost destroyed everything. One morning, Phil received a shocking call from Japan. It was from Onitsuka Tiger. They told him that they were ending their partnership with Blue Ribbon Sports. Phil was confused. Why? He had been selling thousands of their shoes. Business was booming. Then he found out the horrible truth. Onitsuka had secretly been looking for a new distributor in America. They were planning to cut Phil out and take over the U.S. market themselves. If this happened, Blue Ribbon Sports would be finished. Everything Phil had built, the late nights, the track meets, the loans, the struggles, would all be for nothing. He had two choices. One, give up and let Onitsuka take everything. Two, fight back and build his own brand. And in that moment, Phil Knight made the most important decision of his life. He would create his own shoe company. But there was one massive problem. He had no factory, no manufacturer, and no money. Phil had only a few months before Onitsuka cut him off completely. So he needed to move fast. He gathered his small team and told them, "We're going to create our own shoes." But what would they call the company? They needed a name that was powerful, inspiring, and unforgettable. They brainstormed for weeks. They considered names like Dimension 6 and Falcon. But then, something magical happened. One night, Jeff Johnson had a dream. In the dream, he saw the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. He woke up and immediately told Phil. And just like that, Nike was born. But a name wasn't enough. They needed a logo. Phil went to a young graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson and asked her to design a logo. She created the swoosh, a simple curved checkmark that represented movement, speed, and victory. And how much did she charge for this now famous logo? Just $35. With a new name and logo, Nike was ready to fight back. But they still didn't have shoes. Phil needed to create a shoe that was better than Onitsuka Tiger. He turned to the one man who had always obsessed over shoes, his old track coach, Bill Bowerman. And Bowerman had a genius idea. One morning, as he was making breakfast, he looked at his waffle iron. And then, it hit him. What if the bottom of a shoe had the same pattern as a waffle? He ran to his lab, poured rubber into a waffle iron, and created the first Nike sole. The result? A shoe that was lighter, faster, and had better grip than anything else on the market. The first Nike shoe, the Nike Waffle Trainer, was born. And now, Phil was ready for war. Chapter 3. Nike struggled to become a giant. Even though Nike had its own shoe now, they still had no money. Phil had spent every last dollar on developing the new shoe and breaking away from Onitsuka. But to sell more shoes, Nike needed factories, materials, and marketing. And all of that required cash, millions of dollars that Nike simply didn't have. So Phil had to do something he hated: beg for money. Phil went to the banks once again, hoping to get a loan to expand Nike. He walked into one bank after another, showing them his shoes, explaining his vision. But the banks laughed at him. "You want us to invest in some small shoe company? Competing against Adidas and Puma? Are you crazy?" Nike wasn't a brand yet. It was just a struggling company trying to stay alive. And once again, every bank said no. Phil was furious. He had spent years proving that Nike could be something special, but nobody believed in him. But he refused to give up. Finally, he found one small bank willing to take a risk. The catch? The interest rate was extremely high, and he had to personally guarantee the loan. That meant if Nike failed, Phil would lose everything: his house, his savings, his entire future. But he took the risk, because failure was not an option. Just when Phil thought things were under control, Onitsuka Tiger struck back. They sued Nike for stealing their shoe designs. They claimed Phil had betrayed them and was now illegally selling shoes that looked like Onitsuka's designs. The lawsuit was a disaster. If Nike lost, they would have to shut down and pay millions in damages. Phil was devastated. Everything he had worked for was now at risk. For months, the legal battle continued. And just when it seemed like Nike might lose, something unexpected happened. The court discovered documents proving that Onitsuka had planned to betray Phil first. That changed everything. In the end, the court ruled in favor of Nike, and Phil finally cut ties with Onitsuka forever. Nike had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Because now, Nike had to do something much harder: become a real brand. Back then, Nike didn't have fancy marketing like today. They didn't have sponsorship deals, TV ads, or celebrity endorsements. They were just a small company trying to sell shoes. So Phil and his team got creative. Instead of wasting money on big advertisements, they focused on something powerful. They went directly to athletes, giving them free Nike shoes and asking them to wear them in competitions. And it worked. Runners, basketball players, and coaches started noticing Nike shoes. They were lighter, faster, better. And soon, athletes started talking about them. Nike was still a small company, but they were gaining momentum. Nike needed a breakthrough product, a shoe that would make people notice them. And that's when Bill Bowerman struck again. He had already invented the Nike waffle trainer, but now he wanted to create something even better. He started experimenting with different materials, different soles, and new technology. And after months of testing, he came up with something revolutionary: the Nike Cortez. This wasn't just another running shoe. The Cortez was lightweight, stylish, and had the best cushioning any athlete had ever seen. And then, something magical happened. The 1972 Olympics were coming up, and Nike made sure their shoes were everywhere. When people turned on their TVs, they saw athletes wearing Nike shoes, winning races, setting records, making history. Nike was still a small company, but now the world was watching. And then came the moment that changed everything. By the late 1970s, Nike was growing fast, but it was still behind Adidas. They needed something big, something that would change everything. Then, in 1984, they made a decision that would take them from just another shoe company to the biggest sports brand in the world. They signed a young basketball player, a player who wasn't the biggest star yet, a player many brands ignored. His name? Michael Jordan. At the time, Jordan was just a rookie. Adidas didn't want him. Converse wasn't interested. But Nike? Nike saw something special. They didn't just want Jordan to wear their shoes. They wanted to build a brand around him. But there was a problem. Michael Jordan didn't want to sign with Nike. His dream brand was Adidas. He told his agent, "I don't even want to meet with Nike." Nike refused to give up. So they went to someone who had the most influence over Michael, his mother, Dolores Jordan. She listened to Nike's offer and then told her son, "Michael, you're going to listen to them." Because of his mother, Michael Jordan agreed to meet with Nike. Nike took a massive risk. They offered Jordan a huge contract and created a special shoe just for him, something no company had ever done before. That shoe was the Air Jordan 1. At first, the NBA banned the shoe because of its colors, but that only made it more popular. Then Jordan started winning. He dominated the game, and suddenly, everyone wanted to be like him. Everyone wanted his shoes. Air Jordans sold out everywhere. Nike couldn't keep up with demand. In just a few years, Nike went from a growing company to a billion-dollar empire. Chapter 4. The Empire of Nike. Nike was no longer a struggling company. It was a global sports empire. The name Nike wasn't just a brand anymore. It had become a symbol of greatness. Everywhere you looked, athletes were wearing Nike. Michael Jordan dominated the NBA in Air Jordans. Cristiano Ronaldo ran across the football field in Nike boots. Serena Williams crushed her competition in Nike gear. But Nike wasn't finished yet. Because there was still one thing missing. They needed one message, a slogan that would define them forever. The birth of Just Do It, the slogan that changed everything. It was the late 1980s. Nike was growing fast, but they needed a way to connect with everyone, not just professional athletes, but also regular people. They needed something that would inspire runners, basketball players, footballers, and even ordinary people in gyms. That's when Dan Whedon, a marketing genius, had an idea. He wanted 3 simple words, something easy to remember, something that made people feel unstoppable. And then he came up with it. Just do it. It was short, powerful. And when Nike launched their first Just Do It commercial in 1988, featuring an 80-year-old man running a marathon, something incredible happened. People felt inspired. They weren't just buying shoes anymore. They were buying a mindset. Nike wasn't just selling sneakers. They were selling a dream. And soon, the whole world started saying, "Just do it." It became one of the most iconic slogans in history, and it made Nike unstoppable. With Just Do It, Nike's sales skyrocketed. In 1988, Nike was making $1.2 billion a year. By 1996, they hit $6.4 billion. By 2003, Nike was earning over $10 billion. And today, Nike is worth over $190 billion. That's more than Adidas, Puma, and Reebok combined. And it all started with a man who sold shoes out of his car. And with every new star, Nike's empire grew bigger and stronger. Because when people saw their idols wearing Nike, they wanted to wear it too. And Nike became a part of history. Even after Michael Jordan retired, Nike kept selling Air Jordans. And guess what? The Air Jordan brand alone makes over $5 billion per year. That's right. Just one line of shoes makes more money than most entire companies. Even today, people wait in long lines for hours just to buy a new pair of Jordans. And this is why Nike is different. They don't just sell shoes. They create culture. They make products that people dream of wearing. Nike wasn't just taking over America. They wanted the whole world. So they expanded to Europe, signing football clubs like Barcelona and PSG. Asia, dominating China and Japan's sportswear market. South America, partnering with Brazil's national football team. Africa, sponsoring the best young footballers. Now Nike is in every country, every city, every street. No matter where you go, you see the swoosh logo. Nike isn't just a company, it's a movement. Even the biggest companies face problems. Nike had many challenges over the years. Scandals. They were accused of using sweatshops and child labor in factories. Financial crashes. The 2008 crisis almost destroyed their profits. Competition. Adidas, Puma, and Under Armour tried to take their place, but Nike always fought back. They improved working conditions, signed new superstars, and kept innovating. And every time someone thought Nike was finished, they proved everyone wrong, because winners never quit. Today, Nike is the biggest sports brand on earth. Over $50 billion in annual revenue, more than 75,000 employees, sold in over 190 countries. Worn by the greatest athletes in history. Nike's story is more than just about shoes. It's about believing in something before the world sees it. Phil Knight had no money, no support, and no guarantees. But he had a vision. He believed in Nike when nobody else did. And because of that, he built an empire. Nike's story teaches us one thing. No dream is too big. No challenge is too hard. No failure is the end. If you believe in yourself and never give up, you can achieve anything. Now it's your turn. Do you believe in the power of never giving up? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more amazing success stories. Because your success story is waiting to be written. All you have to do is just do it.